In my last video I showed off this Boardman MHT8.8 which I was able to pick up for just £250. I've actually been riding this bike a lot over the summer and thoroughly enjoying it as well. However, there are a number of expensive components that are going to start to need replacing. And as this bike loses its cheap status, I really want to do something about the dreadful paintwork. I have to say I really do like the colour scheme that this bike came with, but it's just full of deep chips and scratches throughout the frame. So today we're going to be having a go at completely respraying the frame with a certainly unique colour scheme, as well as also fitting an exciting new upgrade. So after removing all the components off the bike, we're going to really rough up that lacquer on the top surface before we apply any paint stripper. While the paint stripper made short work of the lacquer and silver layer, it was completely unreactive to the primer underneath. This meant I had to sand down as much of the original primer as I could, which took much longer than I'd like to admit. At this point I probably should have paid someone to sandblast the frame back to the bare metal. As you'll see, this has a knock-on effect to the final finish of the paint. Another mistake I made was to use a very cheap black primer. As you can see here, barely any of the paint is actually coming out of the can, so I actually had to spray the frame completely with the bottle tipped upside down. So I left the primer to dry for 24 hours and then came back and tried to wet sand as many of the imperfections as I could. So for the colour, I'm going with this Chameleon colour shifting paint. The instructions say that you need 3 to 5 very thin coats of paint that are separated by about 30 to 60 seconds. You'll see after the first coat of this that there is barely any effect noticeable at all. This made me panic a little bit and I started to apply the coats a lot thicker onto the frame. This was a massive mistake, as although I could see the effect coming through more clearly, I also caused the paint to really crack up and form almost scales on the surface. After the 5th coat, I left it to dry for 5 minutes as per the instructions. I then went in with 3 layers of 2K clear coat. My main concern at this stage was actually not being able to seal in the paint because of all the cracking and scaling that had occurred. So to counteract this, I put a much thicker layer of lacquer on those areas where the scaling was most severe. I then left the lacquer to dry for 48 hours to really solidify and let that colour shifting paint come through. And now it's just a case of ripping off the masking tape and rebuilding the frame with all the components. So after building the bike back up, we have our final result. While I think the colour shifting paint is quite cool, you can move around the bike and it will shift from a bronzy sort of colour to a slightly metallic green colour. It's definitely not the effect that was advertised on the image that was used for the product, but to be fair, I didn't do exactly what the instructions said, so I can't really expect that result. It's also a real shame that my impatience got the better of me, which ultimately caused the paint to crack and bubble up, because in the areas where the paint is smooth, the colour shifting effect is very well pronounced. I think it's likely that this paintwork won't last particularly long because of the cracks in the lacquer, but we'll just have to see how it goes, and at least now I know the things not to do next time. Anyway, at least the RockShox Reba forks that I bought for the bike fit really well. I think they also look a lot better than the RockShox Judy forks that were installed before. I also managed to pick them up very cheaply on eBay, so they definitely fit in with the theme of this bike being very low cost. So I hope this video has been somewhat informative and enjoyable, and I hope to see you all soon.